Um, hello, everyone. My name is Tenzin Chuki. Tonight, I, along with Gichinila, who's the co-founder of Indian Coaching and also our all-time favorite English teacher, Kendisela, will be speaking in English for our audience who may not necessarily speak Tibetan. So that means we do have a separate video recorded in Tibetan language if you're interested. So this video will solely be focused on our upcoming virtual summer camp. And as many of you know that we had our first ever virtual summer camp last year, I think I will jump into my first question. Gichmila, is there any changes from last year's summer camp? And also, how are our students going to engage with Tibetan language and culture this year?
Thank you, Genshukila, for the question. As you just mentioned, last year we had an incredibly powerful virtual summer camp experience. We had overwhelmingly positive feedback from parents and students. Teachers also thoroughly enjoyed their experience despite the workload. So if you haven't checked out the video about our summer program from last year, please go ahead and check it out. It's posted on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and you'll have a better sense of what we're talking about. So for this year, it's a little bit different from last year. As I mentioned, last year we had one session for the entire summer, and it was 7 weeks long. And this year we actually are giving more options. So you have choices, folks. We have two sessions. Our first session is 4 weeks long, and it's from July 1st to July 30th. And we will be teaching all of our regular subjects, which are Tibetan, Chinese, mathematics, and C-learning course along with all the 4 subjects. And our second session is 3 weeks long. It is from August 1st to August 20th. And our second session will focus more on Tibetan language and culture. We will also have some Chinese and C-learning along with Tibetan culture and language. On a side note, you can actually sign up for our now 6th year, I think, programming for our rising seniors and juniors in high school. That program is going to start on June 28th and it will run through July 28th. And this is a session specifically for students who need support in the areas of college application. For instance, if you need help with things like resume, personal essay, FAFSA, supplemental essays, right, scholarship opportunities, please reach out to us. And obviously, we will still have our regular weekend programming, and it's going to be a really busy summer for all of us since we will be serving students as young as 1 in our global playroom and as old as 17 years old. So please take advantage of all the offerings, and we're excited to see you.
Awesome. Yeah. So definitely there are a lot of programs already, and we have few more programs adding to our summer during our summer. So I think I can jump on to the second question. What are some key education issues and challenges for our immigrant community? So Gidesila, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you for asking that loaded question, Genchukila. There are certainly a lot of factors that are unique to immigrant students, which affect their ability to adapt, and of course, as well as to succeed in their schools, including social and economic conditions in their homes. But just to speak on like at the broader level, and I'm sure some of our viewers already have some knowledge on the points that I'm going to be talking about. For instance, immigrant students do face a lack of exposure to various learning opportunities, especially now with the pandemic and with the shift to remote learning. A lot of students are struggling, kind of, adapting to the new mode of learning, and not being able to see their friends, not being able to make those important connections with their peers. And as we may know, a lot of immigrant students are also first generation students like myself, and we face a lot of difficulties in navigating the school system. And so this unfamiliarity can lead to students having negative attitudes and emotions towards school. For instance, not knowing which courses to take, um, which might lead to anxiety as well as this transferred to like general in terms of taking tests, as well as about studying. And so that's why it's really important to make sure, especially when you're in secondary school, but more so in high school, to make sure that you have to set, those study habits, making sure that you know which learning strategy works best for you. And also, I think it's important to talk about the fact that students from diverse backgrounds are often over referred to special education. In the Canadian context, and speaking again from my own personal experience, a lot of students get streamed into applied courses or applied classes. And I'm sure this is similar in the States as it is in Canada here. The tracking system and the testing methods in our education system can really disadvantage this group of students that we're talking about, which ultimately denies these students the quality of education that we deserve. And I think Chimela, I think this is your area of expertise. If you can maybe talk about the more specific, I guess, barriers or obstacles immigrant students face.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Dasila, for the comments. And as many of you know, this is a very big question. And thank you, Genchukila, for asking this really critical question. There are honestly too many challenges to list them all. So I'm going to focus on just three challenges for the purpose of this conversation. So the first is something that I often bring up whenever I have an opportunity to talk about education, which is education inequality. And it is one that is growing globally and in the United States. And it is due to lack of resources, limited funding in education, and this leads to lack of individualized learning, one-on-one attention, and oftentimes when teachers are understaffed and when they have to deal with 30, 40, 50 kids at once, they have to use so-called best practices or one size fit all types of tools or teaching methods. And we all know that every child is different. Everyone learns differently. And using so-called one size fit all types of tools is not effective. And this leads to a lot of challenges for students, as again, Dasila mentioned. And many of the immigrant children are also facing a lot of cultural barriers, language barriers, and more importantly, they do not see themselves reflected or represented in the curriculums that they're being taught. And when they don't see themselves reflected in the curriculum that is being taught in the various schools, they feel a sense of displacement or detachment. And representation matters when students are forming their identities as they're growing. And as a Tibetan political refugee and immigrant in this country, I had to also sort of reconcile a lot of different cultural values in a Tibetan households. We're often taught to be polite and obedient and respect the elders and so on and so forth. Whereas in my school setting, I was told to be assertive, confident, and speak my mind. And I had trouble navigating these two sort of binary worlds that seem to sort of collide with each other. And I believe this experience is true for a lot of students who are coming from different cultural backgrounds, different values. So that is something to keep in mind as we think about education. And I think COVID has made this inequality much more stark and visible. We know COVID has disrupted education globally, and the impact is felt so much heavier by folks who were already most underserved and underfunded. And we also faced many challenges as we were trying to navigate education in this COVID world. So many schools were so unprepared to respond to this crisis. Um, Thankfully, some schools were well prepared and they were able to train their teachers ahead of time to do remote learning. And slowly, more schools were able to pick up. But we have had many schools who could not teach their children for some time, and that's going to have an impact on those students who missed out. And we know that remote learning has been an interesting experience for our students. Obviously, different students responded differently to remote learning. Some students succeeded and thrived, and many students did not like it. They actually felt a deep sense of social isolation and loneliness because they couldn't connect with their friends. So we are very mindful and aware of these issues. And I think we as educators have to be attuned to these changing world as we educate the students who are going to be our future leaders. And the last part that I want to talk about is something called summer decline or summer slide. It is a phenomenon that occurs to students in the United States and in Canada, where we have long breaks. And studies have shown again and again that many students experience decline in reading ability, and they also lose other academic skills due to lack of academic engagements over these summer vacations. And again, this is felt strongly by students who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds. Again, many of these families can't afford to have other educational experiences. So many of these students end up spending a lot of time at home on their couches, watching a lot of television and playing games, which aren't always healthy for them. So therefore, it's really important that we think creatively about these challenges and find a solution to mitigate some of these issues. And I think it's really important for organizations and institutions to think about these challenges and figure out creative solutions to address these issues. And so we are super excited to offer some programs for our immigrant children where they can feel a sense of belonging, where they can continue to engage in meaningful learning while still being healthy and engaged. And we, of course, want to be super intentional about what they're learning, just to make sure that they're not overloaded and we don't create more problems instead of solving them. So that's what I have to say about the challenges, as I mentioned, right? Education inequality, the impact of COVID on education, and summer decline are sort of three main challenges that I think are critical at this juncture.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Gichmila. And I think my next question is, how will Yin Coaching's offering help or address some of these challenges that you just talked about?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, fostering a sense of belonging through our focus on social, emotional, ethical learning, which is abbreviated as C-learning. It is an education framework that was initiated by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, along with well-known psychologists in the field. And we incorporate C-learning in every subject that we teach, which are Tibetan, Chinese, mathematics, and English. And C-learning framework makes all types of learning reflective, intentional, and it helps students consider the ethical aspects of one's learning rather than just thinking about, okay, what is the skill that I need to develop, but it's about, you know, it's about thinking what's really important, what's the takeaway from my learning, and how is this going to actually impact the world that I live in, right? And so we really believe that in the 21st century, it is not sufficient to just develop your mind, but it is even more important to develop your heart by considering the ethical aspects of one's learning. And as I mentioned, we don't want to overschedule our children because we do know that mental health is another issue that's rising, and we believe that it's important to keep them engaged, but on a healthy schedule. So it's only 3 weeks. It's only 3 hours per day, and we ensure that the learning is fun, exciting, and engaging. And our lessons cater to the needs of the students. It's designed in a way that is flexible and accommodating. And our instructors are also professionally trained and equipped to consider many different perspectives, voices to ensure that their voices are heard and represented in the curriculum that we teach.
Wow, sounds like a great program, and we have a lot planned for this summer. And I know a lot of parents have reached out to us, and some are probably thinking about enrolling their kids for our summer program. So, Gay Chimila, what are some things they should keep in mind? What are their responsibilities as parents? And what role do they play in their child's learning?
Yeah, that's really important. So when we think about learning, right, and when we think about children, I often say to parents that it takes a village to raise a child, and I really mean it. Really, it takes I think, supreme amount of teamwork. And what I mean by that is we need to work collaboratively in order to see the fullest potential in every kid. And what that means is that we have to be committed. We, as the parent, teacher, and the student, we have to work together. We have to show up for each other. We have to be on time. And I think it's super critical and important to have effective, transparent, and frequent communication with each other. So if an issue arises, it's really important that a parent reaches out to the teachers at Indian Coaching. And similarly, if the teachers see any issues that needs to be communicated with the parents, that happens as well. And lastly, some just logistical things to consider. Since this is happening virtually, it's important to have a reliable Wi-Fi service. And it's important that students have access to some sort of electronic device, whether that's an iPad or laptop. And as we think about, creating a safe and sound environment for our children, it's also important to think about their environment at home. What kind of learning environment are we creating for these students? So I think it's important to think about where we're placing our children when they're learning, right? Because children are very visual, especially when they're young. They need time and place for everything. So it's nice to have these. This is one of the reasons why educators have these stationaries, right? Even in the classroom, so that kids know if they go to station one, then they're reading or they're working independently. If they go to station number two, then they know they can draw or do something fun and creative, right? And if they go to station three, they know they can talk to their classmates. So I think having a sense of place is super important. And I think it's important to know that their kids are also in a place where they can focus and pay attention to their teachers, meaning that they need to have a nice, sorry, I don't mean nice, but they need to have a place where they can actually focus and work and learn and thrive.
Yeah. Thank you, Gila. I think, now the parents are becoming the teachers and the parents. I know it's a lot to ask, but, and right now, Wi-Fi and electronic device is extremely important to the kids for their learning. And I hope that parents will keep that in mind. So I think this is the end of our conversation. However, if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, we are always open to suggestions and concerns. Please send us an email. And also, if you want to register your child for a summer program, a weekend program, college prep, we are open now. So register early. Don't wait until the last minute. And yeah, I think Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in class. And don't forget to follow us on social media. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.